Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Tam with me here today. Thank you so much for joining me, Tam. I had the privilege of being a guest on Tam's podcast recently, and we decided that she should join us on the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast as well. We had such a lovely time connecting. And so I'll just start with my usual question, Tam. Share with us about your personal womb-centered healing journey. What does that mean for you? When do you feel like it began? Or when do you feel like you've become more aware of that as a focus in your life?
Yes. Well, Sama, I'm so excited to be on your podcast. Like you said, that we had a great conversation. And one of the more engaging conversations that I've had in the last couple of months, I've been on a lot of podcasts and talking to a lot of people. And I've told a lot of people about your podcast because I love what you're doing. So my journey, it's interesting because I never thought of it like that. But, as an African-American woman, there's a lot of things that we are holding. I think all women are holding something. And we were talking right before we started the podcast about some of the things we're holding on to from not only our own life, our mother's life and her mother's life, and all of those things are passed down. And so if I had to pinpoint a time where I was very aware of my womb-centered healing journey is when my mother passed. And it was like in 2016. And something was not right. Like everything that I was doing before seemed to be, you're doing your life, but something was, I couldn't stop ignoring that I wasn't, I needed some work. So I ended up going to a 5-day seminar or workshop. It was intense, right? And some things that came up for me were something that had come up for me before when I was 4 years old and watched my mom getting abused by my dad. And I thought I had gotten over a lot of that. I needed still to forgive, to recognize that was still something for me. It was still affecting me. And I knew it affected me, like in my choices of men and my dating career and my choices of business and why I work so damn hard and why I'm a businesswoman who is almost trying to kill myself because I'm trying to be so successful. All that stuff is stemming from that point, that 4-year-old, who decided that she was going to protect her mother, who decided that she was going to be a big girl, who made that mean something. And all of that, I realized I had to heal from some of that. And I really had to forgive my father and forgive myself, right? So I'm still on a journey of just healing. But then when you and I talked, because, that's 4 years old, right? 3 or 4. And you and I talked, we realized, and first time I had realized it goes further back. I had never considered, 3 or 4 is my earliest memory. But you said, no, I would dare say it's further back. It's from that womb that, if I think about my mom and dad and their relationship, I'm looking at a man who was young. They're both young, early 20s, right? He was a pretty man, very pretty. My mom picked a pretty one, right? Because she liked pretty. And he was abusive, extremely abusive. So they're 20 years old and he's sleeping around and doing whatever he's doing. So I can't imagine her. She probably was mesmerized by his looks until, she realized that this wasn't healthy for her or her daughters, right? So what made her make that choice, first of all, to go for a pretty man, right? Now you're dealing with dark skin, light skin stuff, that's held over from my mother's era, my grandmother's era. What's better? Light skin, pretty hair. I mean, all this stuff is still going back because we have to fight oppression. So we have to make the kids lighter, you know, so I'm sure that was going on. You know, it's a lot, you know, that we're holding on to. And then I think when I had a conversation with my mom, I could go on and on. I tell you, Sama, this has brought up a lot of things, because my grandmother, I remember my mom telling me that my grandma said, and this makes me almost want to tear up a little bit, that she couldn't tell my grandfather when she was going to get a hysterectomy. She needed one. And she couldn't tell my grandfather, because back then you don't tell men stuff like that. And I remember my mom telling me, don't tell men everything. They can't handle that. And this is something this is a part of a woman, who she is, you know, and some of those things that I just refuse to do, because I'm like, bump that, you know. But yeah, that kind of stuff is passed on from my grandmother to my mother to me, you know, that just makes you not you just feel like less than. And that affects you.
Yeah, so what I hear you talking about is belief systems, intrinsically harmful and self-denigrating
Yeah.
belief systems, not only about men and women, but about skin color and racism, internalized racism.
Internalized racism. Yeah.
And I mean, I remember my Mexican grandmother not wanting to watch me at the pool.
Yeah.
Because she had a pool in her backyard, right?
Yeah.
And she would limit the amount of time that she would be out there in the sun, because she didn't want her skin to get dark. And this is an internalized thing for many people around the world.
That's right.
Somehow lighter skin is better, but what your mom found out was that wasn't necessarily true.
Oh, this fool was beaten. You know, this fool was terrible. You know, I mean, and I have to, and I think about that often. It wasn't like, I guess she changed her mind about that. That was one thing. But, you know, and I'm not saying all light-skinned people are bad. That's not even like that. I'm not saying that either. She just happened to pick one who was a piece of work, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's the belief systems around colorism and you know, my mom, because all three of her kids were lighter complected. My mom was beautiful, chocolate brown skin. And she would take us around my father's side of the family. And they were, you know, kind of uppity. And they said, oh, no, my mom would put like cornrows in our hair. And they would say, oh, no, we don't do that to our children. And that's just like, it just goes on and on and on, right? So when you start dealing with womb healing for an African American woman, it just goes on and on. And we can just probably anyone could bring up some stuff, but from my perspective, that's what it brings up for me.
Well, you know, in my anti-racism work,
right. We're
going right there, because
we're going right there, girl.
This is up for everybody right now, and
right.
one of the things that has been deepening that lately is becoming aware of the wounds that aspiring towards the ideal of whiteness inflict upon us all. And who has been indoctrinated in trying to become more like the acceptable whiteness to gain the privileges of that culture, right? And so the wounds of that are this disconnection from ancestry. So erasing our ancestral heritage,
right?
The cornrows, the attempt to lighten the skin, you know, and then it goes deeper than that, you know, spiritual traditions and you know, cultural traditions. Like not even knowing what Juneteenth was. And having that erased. I have similar erasures from my background that creates a wound in us to
Yes,
have
it does.
that disconnection from ancestral heritage. That all of those heritages give us strength and a sense of well-being and so many things,
Yep,
connectivity in a community. And then there's the disconnection from community, the
that's right.
individualism. You have to make it on your own, right? And not rely on the support from your community.
Yeah,
That's a wound because it goes against our very humanity. We're social beings, we're communal beings. And this whole ideal of making it on your own is
yeah,
so contrary, and it's wounding to us. So many people get so burnt out by that whole approach. And then the disconnection from our own bodies
yeah,
and the disconnection from nature.
yeah,
All of these disconnections are deep core wounds that I feel are happening in the womb and throughout the generations, and undermine what our womb power really is.
yeah,
And our womb power is all about connection to our ancestry.
yeah,
That's where we have that energetic umbilical cord back through the generations and forward through the generations, where we can claim and be nurtured by the strengths and beauties of our ancestry
yeah,
and carry that forward to our descendants. And then our womb helps us connect with Mother Earth, and nature and ecology helps us connect in relationship with the emotional wisdom with our community and develop that and build that and grow that, and helps us connect with our body and have intrinsic body wisdom. It helps us connect with our soul, with our spirit, which is another way that idealized, how to get privilege in our society makes you divest of any of that, right? And so we wound ourselves chasing after this illusory thing, which just keeps us enslaved and exploitable,
yeah.
basically.
Well, you know what's interesting, and I think about and I use, since we're talking about this specifically, African Americans, it's amazing that African Americans have been able to do as much as they have been able to do, and the contributions that we made to this country. Because, and the reason why I say it like that, and makes us have pause, because if you think about all the Africans that came on the slave ships, and if you know anything about how they were brought here, the horrendous situation in which they were brought, right? Sleeping in feces and bodily fluids, laying just laying down the whole time, laying next to people that died, and just
Not being able to sit up, not even
be able to sit up, and it's how scared they all must have been. And not only that, when they were brought over here, there were many different nations, and Africa is a huge continent, and so there's many countries in there and many different languages, right? And many tribes and many ways of doing things. And so a lot of the Africans that came here, they weren't all the same tribe. Some of them may have even been from warring tribes. They didn't have the same cultures and food preparations, and they didn't do the same thing. So they came here, and a lot of them couldn't even probably communicate with each other. So then that's fear, and that's been added to the whole thing. Then you have the craziness with slavery for all those years, that fear just passing on and passing on. And then Jim Crow laws, and then it's a lot. So when you get down to this moment, right, and I have chosen to not go through that whole thing like I just did now, but instead to focus on all we were talking about this before we got on the call, all the women that survived that, right? Because I can go to the negative, right? We just went through all the negative parts of that journey, right? I could probably pinpoint all the way back to Africa if I wanted to, but I chose to say all the women that were strong enough to survive made sure that I was here, right? So therefore, I was going to say I'm a bad bitch, but I'm not going to say that.
Well, you did a little bit.
I said that to make you laugh, Sama. But, I mean, you just take strength from that. You find a way to take strength from that.
And I feel that when we acknowledge that kind of strength from our ancestry, when we claim it, we're also giving something to our ancestors that didn't have that acknowledged, that got it constantly beaten down.
That's right.
And in so many different ways.
That's right.
And so claiming that now, and then that claims that heals that wound of disconnection from the ancestors. It's just about, I was on another podcast the other day where the question came up, do we need to dredge up all of our traumas, and look at, revisit, like you were saying, do we need to revisit all of these traumas and all of it, because it becomes overwhelming. I mean, already have traumas in our lives, and then if you're a person of color or a Black woman, for example, then it's compounded, it's added even on top of the regular traumas that I might have experienced. Then you've got this whole other set on top of that,
right?
And then just for your own lifetime. And then when we start talking, no wonder people say ancestral healing. I don't have time for that. That's too. But the truth is that we don't have to go back and relive all of those traumas to recover from them.
That's it. You don't.
And that's there's some healing modalities that say you have to remember all the details and talk it through, but those are the lesser effective modalities. Those are the ones that tend to keep you looping in the trauma, right? The modalities that people are recognizing more and more that help to actually heal those traumas and move out of those traumas are somatic approaches that aren't about remembering and thinking through, but about feeling where the tension of those traumas are held in the body.
Yeah.
And a lot of those tensions, especially around ancestral wounding, can show up in the womb, in the menstrual cycle, in fertility cycles, in all of those symptoms being intense or whatever. And so when we just focus on how the body feels today, right now, and how can we nurture that? And sometimes ancestral memories will come forth in that somatic exploration, but usually the womb is very wise. It's just enough for that our circumstances and the amount of support that we have right now can hold.
Yeah.
And release that piece. And usually it's like a symbolic offering of memory.
Yeah.
That then that healing can go through that avenue to all the times that any ancestor had a similar, and they're usually very patterned, right? Yeah. It's like, I'm sure this happened to many of my ancestors. It was passed down from one to the next. And oftentimes in ancestral healing sessions, we ask to go to the source point of a particular pattern and like that. And so it's not about remembering every single time that happened in the ancestry. Yeah.
Well, last time I think, and this wasn't even on tape, but then we had gotten off of the call and we were just chatting, and I was bringing up, and this is as it relates to what you're saying now, I was bringing up fibroids, right? And you were saying, and I had never thought of it, right? When you said it, I haven't forgot it. I've been thinking about it ever since. It's all about holding on to something, and now you're talking about the womb, and it's like, these little lumps of mucus that are just holding on to the womb. And I've had consistent issues with fibroids, right? And my mom had issues with fibroids, and my grandmother had issues with fibroids. We all had the same area where it just holds, right? It does affect fertility, and it does affect, menstrual, and it does affect all these things, right? And I would dare say that's probably how the women in my lineage have held on to that unrelieved womb trauma.
And, the other side of this recognition of all of the trauma like that and working to heal, one of the biggest healing things is what you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's recognizing the strength.
That's right.
To survive.
Yes.
And the strategies and the coping mechanisms.
Right.
Some of them are probably still serving you to this day because they become like family traditions, passed down one to the next. And some of them may be serving us, but maybe they need to be revised and updated. They might, or even abandoned. Sometimes we get to a certain place where we realize that a coping mechanism or trauma coping was like a scab on a wound. Yeah. And when we heal that wound, then that scab can fall off. Yeah. And it just brings up what I talk about often, which is that a lot of healing modalities want to rip that scab off before it's really ready to come off. And that rewounds it. And I would say that, diving into the storytelling and trying to force yourself to remember the whole laundry list of traumas that's ever happened to you or that's like ripping the scab off. Whereas if we trust in the wisdom of the womb and the body and reconnect with that to tell us what needs to be remembered and expressed. Yes. And then just release the energy based on that symbolic offering. Yeah. You don't have to go chasing after it.
That's right.
And so I'm curious, have you reflected more on any specific patterns besides just the holding on, what that holding on was about?
Yeah, I have really been thinking, it's interesting. So it caused me to do a couple of things that I hadn't done before, breathing exercises, right? It caused me to do some meditation to try to clear those things, to revisit my mind dumping so I'm not holding on to anything. I'm trying to get clear enough to figure out what is it that I'm holding on to. And I started thinking about, things that okay, so I'll tell you something about my personality, and it has served me, and it's not necessarily the best way to do things. It has served me though, right? Being able to compartmentalize something, put it over here and keep going, right? Because I don't have time to deal with this right now. Push that one to the side, put it in the box. Those are probably my little fibroids, right? Mm-hmm. Just put them over here. I don't have time for that. So is it a big thing? Maybe not. It could just be, I don't have time for that right now. Push that over and keep going forward. Because I don't think we always have, when I say the time for it, because we have to survive. We're busy in ourselves surviving, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have the luxury of caring about certain things at the time, because you're trying to make it. There's a fight going on. If you're out there with a sword, trying to survive life, worrying about my son who's 15 years old who got pulled over by police riding his bike from school. I mean, you're just trying to survive, right? You don't have time to worry about this other thing, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are, and they end up holding on to, is it a big thing? Possibly not. It's just a whole bunch of little stuff that's just in that box.
Piles up and piles up. And we're not taught how to release things in the moment. We're not taught how to, our intrinsic ability to let go of everything every month, how to support that naturally, right? Our menstrual cycle, that's what it's designed for, to give us those few days a month to let everything go. And guess what? We're taught to plug it up, to ignore it, to keep going and prioritizing these other things instead. And what if our society structures were designed as they originally were, around the menstrual cycle? This is, I just did a talk about this recently, that our calendars were originally designed around the menstrual cycle. The written word
It has the,
was
yeah.
invented so that women, because women were trying to figure out how to track their menstrual cycle and how it was related to the moon, so that they knew when they were fertile and how to knew when to make sure that they were safe because they might be giving birth.
Yeah.
Or make sure that they knew when it was time to rest or take care of themselves because they were menstruating. And the whole community got on board with that originally in pre-patriarchal society. Because women were revered for this ability to create new life.
Right.
It was like, divine ability to create a baby, right? A new human being was revered. And so that's the origin of calendars and time management and the written word. And being the whole process where the Romans took that calendar from the people, from the women, and said, no, we're not going to have 13 months based on the moon.
Right.
We have 12 months because 13 gives too much power. 13 months in the year, basing it on the women's menstrual cycle, because that's how many times a woman usually menstruates in the year.
Mm-hmm.
That gives too much. They wanted to take the power away from the women.
Right.
To disconnect everyone from the land so they could be more easily exploited. And I see you having something to say about this.
Girl, yes, Sama. You told me this last time. I'm telling you, some things you said to me was like, that's why I call you Mother Earth. So, so last time we talked, you were like, it's a reminder. You saying the same thing. Period reminds us, or our menstrual cycle reminds us to take a rest, take care of ourselves. And the next time I came on my cycle, I literally my first 3 days, I am off.
Good for you.
It was the first time I'd ever done that. I told my husband, this is to remind me that I need a break. I'm off. And I lay down. I've never done it. And it was so good. The good thing about being an entrepreneur, you can do that, right? Mm-hmm. It's harder for someone who has a job, regular job. Mm-hmm. So I just structured my day in order for me to be off and take it a little bit slower and easier. And I noticed something. Your body is naturally tired because you're iron deficient and you're very lethargic and sleepy when you first come on your period. I'm sure people notice this. Well, I slept like a baby. And I thought, that's what your body is telling you. You're supposed to rest. Sama, that was gold, what you said to me.
Yeah.
That was straight up gold. I took that right when you said it.
And you know what? It's revolutionary.
It is.
It's like that is like the first step to dismantle this collective, production mandate.
Yeah.
That, is what the whole capitalist system is all about, and why racism was invented in the first place.
It benefits. It benefits. When I went so I travel a lot, and I was in Thailand the other day, last year, and I was walking around and I noticed there's some very, very wealthy people in Thailand, and there's some very, very poor people in Thailand. And then there's a lot of expats that are walking around. And the very, very poor people that are building the streets and doing all the work, in not the most safe conditions with their flip-flops on, right? And I'm watching this go on, and it hit me. I said, oh, every country needs the poor class. They need a worker or slave and slavery system, if you will, in order to make the city run, in order for the people to make money, for the rich people to keep making money. They need to ensure that there's always that group of people, right? So that they can make money. And in our country, it started with slavery, right? And then when slavery was over, then we started using the other poor countries that we can exploit and bring them over. We did that with Puerto Rico, we've done that with Mexico, and then we started with the prison system. And believe me, that is a slavery system. That is all built to continue slavery. Just picking up a black man off of the street doing nothing and And even if he did not commit the crime and just putting him in there, that's the slavery system. But it's built so that people can keep making money. And it's not just in this country, it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that's really what we're needing to evolve away from as a human species, because the whole system is built so that there's a few people that are egregiously wealthy, like have way more resources and control over resources and money than they could possibly ever need. Like, it is so off the hook how much money these people have.
Yes.
They could easily abolish slavery worldwide without feeling an inch of discomfort in their bank accounts.
And not even a little bit of discomfort.
They
could abolish world hunger. They could abolish slavery. They can abolish all the atrocities in the world and not even notice. Their lifestyle wouldn't change.
Not one bit. And so it's really, when we start to realize that, the criminality of the current systems becomes really clear. And the necessity for that to be sustained, for the amount of violence that they're willing to implement on the rest of the people, as people are waking up to say, hey, you can't do this to us.
That's right.
But that's an illness in itself, to be that narcissistic. To be that, I kind of feel like the greed monster inside that person must have some side effects.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I would imagine some interpersonal. I mean, I just can't even imagine what it'd be like to be those people that have that much and are letting everybody else in the world, exploiting everyone in the world. But who knows what it will take to heal that. Yeah. Because for me, I feel like humanity is one organism. And I know what it takes for an individual to make systemic changes like we're talking about. And when we go to the bigger organism of all of humanity, then that makes the timeline a little different. Like, one individual lifetime for an individual is a certain number of years. Yeah. Humanity as an organism that has its own lifetime.
That's right.
And the kind of systemic change that we're talking about, it really puts some perspective on it. And I've been really exploring some ancestry that I have that's been on this long game of having this mission, knowing that becoming an ancestor and being a good ancestor to people in this long game was on this long game healing process. And I'm grateful to and I know that probably most of us can connect with ancestors like that have a healing mission as an ancestor. So that's another thing with this ancestral healing that I love sharing with people and reminding people, because we all have this memory of connection to the ancestors within us from our own traditions, from whatever lineage we're in. And
well, I had never thought about it like that before. I never said it like that before, but I did certainly think about that myself, being a healing to the line or continuing the healing to this line. Right. And I said, I needed to, I said it legacy. I said a lot of different ways, but thinking about it in the same way that you're expressing it now.
Yeah. And I'm glad you say the word legacy, because when people think about that in our very money focused society,
think about money.
The only way you can gain power in the world, the structures of the world that they are right now, is to gain more and more money. And that's probably very helpful for a lot of people to get out of poverty, to even begin to think about any of this stuff, because, I think poverty is designed to sustain
sick
system, right? But so that's a really important first step to get out of poverty. And then to start to see that as we heal, there's other kinds of legacies that we can pass on,
Mm-hmm.
right? This legacy of a change of perspective,
That's right.
right? Like you're already talking about, of saying, wait a second, this perspective that lighter skin is better.
Right.
I'm going to bring that learning that my mother had
Right.
forward,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to inherit that.
Right.
And that's a powerful inheritance.
Yeah.
And from your own experience, add to that.
Yeah.
And from your own learning and growth. And that's that kind of legacy. You know, and I've talked with moms and, you know, clients who are doing all this personal growth and changing their approach, and their children are witnessing them change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how many people can you think of that complain about how their parents are always the same and never changed,
Right.
and have difficulty making changes in their own lives and in their own selves because they never saw anyone as a mentor, you know, a model, a role model who could change themselves
That's right.
and make a difference, change in their life. And that legacy, that kind of legacy,
That kind of legacy is important.
yeah,
Yeah. That's right.
a healing legacy.
Yeah.
So what would be some of the healing legacies that you are feeling like you're passing on to your children, that you're demonstrating you know, the change that's happening for us in this?
I think a lot of what is needed for everyone, like white, black, Asian, everyone, is personal development, mindset development, healing, working on yourself, all those words that people say, right? But a lot of it's never been done. You know, in my past, I'm sure my grandmother didn't do mindset work and personal development. I'm sure my mom didn't. I'm sure. However, it's definitely needed. I mean, in the Black community, you don't even go see a psychologist or psychiatrist. It's not something that they look down at, frown at. You know, if somebody's crazy, that's just crazy John down the street, right? That's how they just call it, right? They used to say, oh, Black people don't have time to be crazy. We don't have time to have mental health or whatever. They just never acknowledged it. Now it's starting to be acknowledged more and more. I mean, recently, right? But it's not fully embraced. So for me, I do a lot of work. I do a lot of work on myself, and I encourage and teach my child to do the same thing, and let him know that it is impossible to get through this life without being affected by it. So you have to be constantly doing the work on yourself, because, you know, this only thing you can really be assured of changing is yourself, you know. So that's my legacy. Hopefully, if I do it well enough and teach him well enough, he will take that legacy on and teach that to his children, you know, and allow them to realize. And then the other thing that I take on, you know, as someone who's visible, as a Black woman who's visible, being a role model and encouraging other Black women to do the same, Black people to do the same, you know, to just working on themselves. That's the only thing we can be assured of, right? Something keeps coming up. I keep not wanting to say it, but I'm going to say it because it keeps coming up. You know, I used to have this idea, and it kind of goes back to this whole light skin craziness, this colorism stuff. And I know a lot of people had this difficulty thinking that if I just act better, do better, or be more like the majority, if I just do what they want us, be better, then we'll be treated better, right? And I think that was kind of the background that came from slavery time. And it kind of feels like that's the right answer. Like you say, oh, okay, well, man, that kind of makes sense, but it doesn't work is the problem, right? And this is, I think, part of the protesting part of it is realizing that it really still doesn't work, because even if you talk, you know, beautifully, look beautifully, act beautifully, dress beautifully, do everything that's expected by the majority, you don't have that resume when you are sitting in your car or being beat down by the police. You don't have that resume when somebody looks over and they see that they're just a Black person or brown person. You don't have that. And you still are treated, no matter what, the same. So that's what I believe. Part of the being tired is tired, right? They're tired. So when I say that I want to pass on this personal development to be better, to act better, to do better, that's for yourself. That's for your family. That's for your own mental health well-being. It's not necessarily the same conversation as so that you can be accepted by the majority. It's not that. It's not the same conversation, right? Because that doesn't work.
Well, and the thing is, the mainstream majority, the culture of whiteness that we're talking about,
yeah,
also disregards mental health.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And egregiously. And doesn't prioritize personal growth and personal healing. It prioritizes making money for the rich elite. That's it. That's the priority. Sacrificing your own health and well-being for the dollar.
Yeah.
That's the central priority. Disconnecting from all of these sources of health and well-being, the body, the earth, the ancestry, heritage, and spirit. All of these sources where we can go to find health and well-being, to pursue a path of healing and recovery from all the traumas inflicted by that culture of whiteness.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that the people that are in that culture of whiteness are all healthy and well and all that. No. It means that's not prioritized at all.
Yeah.
And so I feel like focusing on that to whatever degree anyone is able to, focusing on our own healing from these traumas is one of the most revolutionary things that we can do.
I agree.
You know, and it's not about conforming, because there's nothing like that to conform to.
No.
The culture of whiteness is very sick and very neglectful of health and well-being. So you're not conforming to that at all by focusing on your health and well-being. So I'm glad we got all that straightened out, because there's a lot of misconceptions about that.
That's
for
right.
sure. And clarifying what that really is about, you know. If that culture was at all focused on health and well-being, it wouldn't be out there oppressing everyone. Using everyone, because that is not a healthy thing to do.
That's right.
It hurts the oppressor and the abuser just as much as it hurts the ones who are being oppressed and abused.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if I shared with you my feeling on power and the power over model versus the power between or within model. Did I share that with you?
I don't think so.
So everyone can pretty much agree that oppression requires this power over model, where there's one person or group of people that has the right to be dominant and to take power from another group of people.
Right.
And that power can be taken, stolen, violently, abusively, however those people who supposedly have power deem fit to take it and steal it. The fact is, those people don't have internal power. They're devoid of it and have to steal it from others. Anyone who steals power from others is empty of power within themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
And are actually powerless, completely dependent on stealing power from others.
Yeah. Yep. You can see that playing out very clearly in a lot every day.
Every day. Whether it's between men and women, whether it's between women and women, but anybody, you know, anybody can be anywhere on that spectrum. Now, there's the systemic power of racism that gives power to certain groups, to the lighter skinned groups, more, that gives them permission to take power from others, right? And systemically supports that. But anybody can buy into that power dynamic and in their relationships, as long as you can find somebody who systemically has less power or right to retain their power or take power from others than you do, then you can find someone to steal power from, thinking you're gaining more power, when actually you're losing power because you've become addicted to taking it from others.
Yeah.
And this is why I teach about anti-racism healing work in my community, because womb healing is all about finding our own intrinsic connection to our unique individual power sources that is our own birthright. So that is connection to our ancestry and all that power you talked about, that you get from claiming the strength of your ancestors who survived all the hardship to be where you're at, right?
Yeah.
And connecting to our spirit, our soul purpose, connecting to the earth, connecting to community where there's shared power, right? Real community is not an authoritarian thing where some leader, is dependent on the servitude of all of the other members of the community.
Right.
That just perpetuates that same domination power dynamic, right? Where we have real community, where each person is encouraged to connect to their own intrinsic power source and share their power with each other, then everyone's power is augmented and uplifted together. And we see this in collaborative business models, where we're looking to do podcast episodes with each other and back and forth, and everyone lifts everyone up. And we know this is our birthright.
That's right.
Be in community in this way. And as we reclaim that, and people who have privilege or systemic power over others divest themselves of that system, we reclaim more of our own inner power. And it's uncomfortable because there may be ways we were addicted to that.
Yeah.
Systemic ways that we didn't even know we learned how to do.
Right. That's right.
And, I'm speaking specifically to white people around this, but I'm sure that people can tell stories from all different places where that has been internalized in the attempt to become more like white people. Guess what?
That's right.
Right. That system, it's not,
but it happens, unfortunately, because people think it's going to give them a better situation, it's going to help, whatever. I mean, that it happens all the time. But, what I'm saying is that, we just need to work on ourselves, help to heal ourselves. That's why I like the work you're doing, because if everyone took this on, I mean, if they really just, because this is just personal work. This is the work, that you get to continually do. If the buck stops here at you healing, then you don't have to pass it on. You don't have to pass on the stuff. My mom passed on some of her stuff, some of my grandma's stuff, some of my great-grandma's stuff. My great-grandma died, and when my grandmother was young, and I cannot remember if she died in childbirth. That's why I say young. But she died. She never knew her mother. She was raised by her sisters. So you can just imagine what was passed on from that.
And also the strength.
That's right. And the strength.
Those are the things that they healed from, probably.
That's right.
That they managed to overcome.
That's right. And that's what I think about Black Americans in general. They have overcome, there's a song, but literally they have survived, really tough situation for, all this time. And I think that, as I said, I take on the strength of it all. and I feel very, very honored to have that strength, have those ancestral, women, that have right here on my back to say, we did we did this for you. We fought through this for you. Now you got it, right? And for me, it's like, it's very powerful to stand in that, to say, well, what am I going to do with that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny, one of the things when I connect with my ancestry, and I connect also with the ancestry of the land.
Yeah.
Here, I'm living on the unceded lands of the Pomo.
Yeah. Well, you should be, because you're Mother Earth, okay?
Well, but I feel called here by that ancestry to, to be here in this healing process and offer my devotion in any way that I can.
Yeah.
And when I connect with that ancestry and ask for help with my pain, for example, usually the answer I get is, you don't know what pain is, honey.
Mm.
Yeah.
Get over yourself. Right. And then there's that.
And there's soothing, there's comforting, there's healing, there's strength that's lent and all of that. But that's the basic thing. Yeah, we'll support you, but you don't know what pain is. And
you don't know what pain is. That's right.
This is the long game. You're on this leg of the journey. We've passed the baton to you. And this is the leg of the journey that you're on. So oh my goodness, Tam, thank you so much for joining us on this episode today. If folks want to get in touch with you, I know you're doing some wonderful things, and I'm excited to hear how these reflections and this growing consciousness of the womb and all the things that are happening in the world are showing up for you in your work. I'm sure that some listeners might feel quite supported by what I know you have a podcast. Could you tell us the name of your podcast again?
My podcast is called Women with Vision, and you can find it everywhere you would normally find podcasts. And then you can also find me on, Women with Vision International.com, or all the IG, same thing, Women with Vision International. And then we have a project right now that I'm working, I'm collaborating with another bunch of amazing women, where we're putting together this, book of stories, just a life journey about, how we, went from A to where they are now. And that's one of the reasons why I like doing podcasting, is because I get a chance to hear, listen, share in people's stories, get on their journey with them. And it's kind of like going to the well, back in the old days when we used to meet at the well and tell story, and that's how we helped each other, and that's how we heal each other. So, in this time, when people, are trying to make it, hurting, or trying to figure out what's the next move, just being able to read some of these other stories could hopefully help them along their way. And so it's called, that book is called Women Who Boss Up.
That's the book, the collaborative book that you.
Yeah, the collaborative book is called Women Who Boss Up, and you can find it at bossupbestseller.com.
All right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, is there any last words of wisdom or insight or reflection that you'd like to share?
No, but Sama, like I said, I enjoyed you so much. This is another deep, beautiful conversation that you don't always get to have with people, and it's very enjoyable. What you're doing is incredible. I highly support what you're doing and saying, and I've loved being here and getting to know you, and I can't wait to do some more stuff with you.
Well, thank you. I feel honored and blessed to have you here with us on the podcast today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And listeners, as you probably know from the intro, you can find out more about what's going on at the Womb Centered Healing Temple by going to wombcenteredhealing.com and signing up for the newsletter there. So looking forward to connecting again next time. That's all for now.